Hi, family. Welcome back to Revive Ministries. I want to share with you today a word about obedience and how your arrival to your promise is tied to your obedience. Now, if you are a first time listener to the Revive Ministries channel, welcome to our family. Welcome to our B2L, which means Back to Life family. If you find that this word is something that really resonates with you and that it's something that next levels you in your relationship with Christ, go ahead and like this chat. And also go ahead and subscribe to our channel so that you do not miss out on anything that God shares with me to share with you that will next level you in your relationship with Christ. Also, if you find that you feel that this word may resonate with someone you know, go ahead and share this with them. Because we are not stingy here at Revive Ministries. It is all about sharing the love of Christ and sharing God's word with others so that everyone can have that opportunity to walk in God's best for their lives. So, with that being said, welcome to our new listeners. And if you are already a part of the B2L family, welcome back to another chat. I'm so glad to have you back on here. Another opportunity to get together as family and just listen to the words that God has for us to next level us in our walk with Him in our everyday lives. So welcome, 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 family. Now, I'm going to go ahead and jump into what I'm going to share with you today. And this is something that the Holy Spirit shared with me a few days ago about obedience. Now, I think we'll all agree that when it comes to being obedient to what God is instructing us to do, there are times when our flesh will overtake what God has instructed us to do. And we may 100% be aware of what what God's instructions are for us to do. But because of our own self desires and self gratification, while we do know His instructions, in order to please our flesh, we decide to go and do what we feel suits us best. And, this is not something that just, maybe a few people fall into this category of being disobedient. We've all been disobedient to God's instructions. There's no one that is perfect in this world and that has always followed every single instruction that has been given to us. But what I do want to share with that in mind, as we go through life when it comes to obedience, it is so important. The Bible tells us that daily we die to ourselves. And that is a part of your obedience. So every day you wake up, daily, you have to die to yourself. And it specifically says daily because you can't operate on today on what you operated on yesterday. So every morning you wake up, before you get up and your feet touch the ground, first of all, we know we talk to God, thank Him for waking us up for another day, and ask Him, God, what is it that you have for me to do? Well, while you're asking Him that, you must also make sure that you ask Him, God, please help me today to die to myself. I want to be obedient to you and to walk in the fullness of your desires, your instructions, your plan for my life. That's what dying to your desires are. So we're humans. Our human nature, we have desires that we want. But we have to learn to, even when we feel that even when our desires are so strong, if it's not what God desires for us, we have to die to those things. We have to let those things to rest. And we have to pick up what his plan and his instructions are for our lives. Even when we don't understand, even when it doesn't feel good to us, even when it doesn't make sense, we have to learn to just say, you know what, God, I trust you. Even though I'm not feeling this, and be real, because he already knows what you feel. Okay, God, this is what I'm feeling, but I'm going to be obedient to you anyway. God, this is what I want to do, but I'm going to be obedient to you. Even though I'm not feeling it, I'm going to be obedient. So we have to learn in our walk to be obedient to God's instructions, because the thing is, if we're not obedient to God's instructions, the disobedience just takes us further from the promise or further from the blessing that he has for your life. And I want you to think about this, the game of Simon Says. So I don't know if you played the game Simon Says when you were younger, but that was one of my favorite games. And if you're not familiar with the game goes like this. Well, Simon is the one who gives you the instruction. And in the game, you have players and you have one person who is Simon. And the one person who is Simon will give instructions to the others playing the game to tell them something to do. So the person who is playing as Simon in the game may tell the others, Simon says, raise your right hand. So the instruction is to raise your right hand. So, of course, you're supposed to do what you're told, raise your right hand. Well, then Simon might say, Simon says, raise your left hand. So then you raise your left hand. So next instruction, he may say, Simon says, touch your nose. Well, if Simon says touch your nose and you touch your eye, you're out. You're out of the game because you didn't follow instructions. So if you played the game, you know, okay, if you didn't follow the instructions, you're out. And you have to sit and you have to wait until the game ends and you come back again and you start all over. So I want you to think about that. If you don't follow instructions, I want you to compare your obedience to that game of Simon Says. But in this case, Simon is God. We're going to say God says. So if we're not closely listening and following God's instructions, if God says, don't go to that event, but we decide, well, everyone's going to be there. I've already made plans and I've already, maybe it's a concert. I've already got my ticket. I have my outfit to wear and, I've got my hair done, but God tells you do not go and you go anyway. You did not follow the instructions. So just like in Simon Says, when you don't follow the instructions, it leads you to the point of you have been disobedient, just like in the game. If you don't obey, it takes you back and you have to wait until the game starts again. So if you're disobedient to God, it takes you back and it reroutes you to a place of having to wait because you weren't obedient in that instruction, so you can't go to the next level. So obedience and how it's tied to you reaching your destination or the blessing that God has for you. So another example I want to give you is the example of using your navigation system. So we are quick. One thing with technology today, you can never get lost. because all you have to have is a cell phone, and you enter whatever address you're going to, enter your location in your phone, and bam, the directions are there for you. Well, we know you put in that address and you hit start, and Siri just routes everything, the whole the whole trip for you from point A to point B to your arrival. So we know as we're using this navigation system, as we're driving, we're following directions, we're following the instructions. So when Siri tells us to turn left, we must turn left. And if Siri tells us to turn right, what do? You turn right, because those are the instructions that she has mapped out to get you to your destination. And most of the time, I don't know if you're like me, I always set it for give me the shortest direction so I can get there quicker. So when you're putting in that address, Siri is giving you the quickest route to get to where you need to go. Your only thing is you have to follow her instructions step by step. So if Siri tells you to take a left onto the interstate, to get on the ramp to hop on the interstate, take the first left. Well, you don't take that left to get on the interstate. You keep straight and you veer off on a different direction to get on a different ramp. Well, what does that do? Because you didn't follow the instructions, it does what? You see that sign that says rerouting, and then you see the little dots behind it, rerouting. So then Siri has to reconfigure the directions to get you to where you need to go, because you did not follow the proper instructions. So in that, when you're rerouted, there may be times where you're rerouted and it ends up putting you off track to where you could have reached your destination sooner, but because you didn't follow the directions, the instructions properly, that it's added on an extra 35, 45 minutes to something that should have taken only 15 minutes to get to. And it kind of reminds you, if you go back, it reminds you of the Israelites, how it took them longer on their journey. Something that was supposed to have been a short journey ended up being 40 years, all because of disobedience. So when we go back to the example with Siri, when she reroutes, it may lead you to a point where you're tacking on an additional 35, 45 minutes to something that should have only taken you 15 minutes. Then it can also tack on a route where maybe there's construction. Maybe you're having to wait it out. Where before it was a straight shoot, now you're going to have to go through construction, or maybe the route you're taking is maybe there's something going on with a traffic jam. But that reroute has led you to a point of having to wait and take a longer journey to get to where you originally wanted to go. Now, had you followed the proper instructions the first time, you would have already reached your destination, but you're still sitting here 35 minutes later, waiting to get to your original destination. And that is a lot like how it is, and I want you to think about that, how it is when you do not follow God's instructions. You know the destination. And I'm just going to use, marriage just for an example. So you know you want to do marriage God's way. You know, God, I've done things myself before, but this time I'm doing it with you. I'm including you. I want to follow your instructions. I'm being obedient to you. And I want to walk this out the way you instruct me to do. So in your journey to your spouse, So that's your destination. You want marriage God's way. You want to get to that point where you're at the altar with the one that he has for you, the individual that he's already that he's purposed you and already written in your plan to be with. So that's your destination. Well, to get there, you have to take the journey. And on that journey, he's giving you instructions. He's telling you, okay, first thing I need you to do is I need you to let everybody go. Anybody you're dealing with right now in a relationship, I need you to let them go. I need it to just be you and me because I need to heal you. I need to spend time with you so I can show you who you are. I need to spend time with you so you can know how you should be treated, so you can experience my unconditional love, so that you can give love and that you can receive love the same way I give and receive love to you. So he's giving you all of these instructions on this journey to your spouse, and he gives you this one instruction. This is one thing I'd say, and this is what God is saying. This is one thing I tell you. In this journey, you must not have premarital sex. Uh-oh. Well, this is a desire. God, you're telling me no premarital sex, but I'm not quite sure if I can do that. That's a tough one right there, God, because I'm used to doing me, and I don't know about that. But God's instruction to you is no sex before marriage. Now, I will say, there are many of us who have slipped up and we've done things outside of God's plan. But also going outside of God's plan, again, it reroutes you to, instead of getting to that destination sooner, you're rerouted because clearly there's something that is missing from your understanding of being obedient to his instruction. Remember, his plans for us are to prosper, to bring us hope and a future. So when he's instructing us to do something, it's because he can see what's on the other side of our obedience. He can see, okay, if you're obedient to this, I can move you to the next level. But if you're not, there's still something there inside of you that I have to work with. I'm going to have to reroute you. And I'm going to have to work on you until you get to the point where you're able to be obedient and listen. Because if you're not obedient with this, how can I trust you to be obedient with the next step? So he says, no sex before marriage. But that's a hard one for you. And you decide, okay, it could go two ways. But you make the choice of letting your self-desires trump God's instructions for you, all because of what you feel. Well, God doesn't understand. He doesn't know how I feel. I mean, just one time, let me just go ahead and do this. And then, but no, he's giving you instructions, no sex before marriage. It doesn't mean to do it this one time and don't do it again. No, he's giving you instructions of no sex before marriage. So that's what that means. No sex before marriage. And you decide that, okay, I'm going to do it this one time and then I'm going to get back on track. Just this one time. He's giving you instructions. So what happens is that you end up rerouted. Just like the example with the navigation system, because you didn't get off on that right turn on that left, you didn't get onto the interstate, and you chose to go a different direction, you had to get rerouted. And because you weren't obedient, it took longer than anticipated just because you did not follow instructions. And that's the same thing when it comes to us. When we don't follow God's instructions, we become rerouted. And that reroute can take an extra, and it can just, not specific time, but just like I gave the example with the children, with the Israelites, how what took them, it took them 40 years, it was supposed to be a shorter journey, but because of their disobedience, it took them 40 years that should have taken them, way less time than it did. And that's what happens to us in our disobedience. When we are disobedient, it reroutes us, and we end up being on the journey, not reaching our destination in a time frame which we could have, because we did not follow God's instructions. And it's important to understand that on your walk, on your journey, when God gives you an instruction, regardless of whether you understand it, regardless of whether it feels good or you don't like it, you have to die to yourself and say, okay, I admit my flesh is not feeling this. I don't even like this. But God, because you said it, I'm going to do it. That's how much I trust you. When you get to that point, God can trust you with that. And then he can move you to that next level on your journey. And because you are being obedient, you won't spend as much time being rerouted because you did not follow his instructions. So I want you to understand in your journey, in your walk, your obedience to God is a factor in you reaching your destination, your promise, your blessing. So when you find times where you may be questioning why you haven't gotten to that destination, why you haven't reached the promise, why it hasn't showed up yet, I want you to take a look back at the steps you've taken. Did you follow God's instructions? When God said, do this, did you do it? Or did you do something that fulfilled your own desire? Even if it was just a small instruction, did you do it? Go back and think about that. And if you find that maybe you have not been obedient, maybe you have been on a consistent reroute on your journey, and you want to see the promise, you want to get to the blessing, but you just have not been obedient. Okay. So now you understand where you are. You understand the steps you've taken in the past. Now it's time to say, okay, God, I die to self every day. And when I say that, daily, every day you wake up, make it a point to say, God, I die to myself. I die to my flesh. My ears are open. My heart is open. My spirit is open to being obedient to you, so that I'm not rerouted and that I am not delaying the promise and the blessing that you have for my life. So, today, make that change. If you find that you haven't been obedient, okay. Ask God for forgiveness. God, forgive me. He knows your heart. And God understands that we're not perfect. Now, you can't keep making that same mistake over and over and over and over and over again. There is grace and mercy, but there's also intention. And when you go into it knowing, okay, well, I'm just going to do wrong. I'm not going to listen to God. I'm going to be disobedient. And then I'll go back to him. And no, it doesn't work like that. God knows your heart. So make sure that your heart is right. and that you are really committed to saying, God, I die to myself and I take on your desires. I am seeking you first. So whatever it is that you want me to do, God, regardless of whether I like it or not, regardless of whether I understand it, God, I am going to do what you instruct me to do because I'm in pursuit of you. And I know your plans for me are to prosper. I know your plans for me are of abundance. I know you've given me a hope and a future. But in order to reach that, I have to be obedient to your instructions. I have to do my part. So family, I really want you to understand that God has those blessings, those desires that you have in your heart that are from him. He has those waiting for you, and he wants you to get to them. However, he cannot allow you to get to a promise when you're not ready for it. If you cannot be obedient in following the small instructions, how can you be obedient when he blesses you with an abundance? You can't, because you can't manage the small things. So just be very cautious when you're going through this journey of life. And this is for all of us. It doesn't matter what level you are spiritually, because from a baby Christian to one that is seasoned, we all daily have to die to ourselves and take on God's take on his mind. We have to daily renew our minds. And that's why the Bible says that daily we renew our minds. Daily we die to ourselves. Because God knows that it is not easy. But it's a choice that we have to make of whether we're going to do it our way or we're going to trust him enough and we're going to do it his way. So family, understand that your actions, your obedience to God is a factor in you attaining and reaching that promise. So if you want that promise, just be obedient to him. Is it easy? No. Is it worth it? Absolutely. The sacrifice is absolutely worth it, because you know on the other side, God has something amazing for you. And even to whatever it is that you're waiting for God to do in your life, whatever it may be, I want you to think about that thing. Think about whatever it is you know God has promised you or you're waiting for God to do in your life, whether it's for finances, relationship, whatever, career, whatever it is, your health. If you're standing on a promise and you're like, okay, God, I'm waiting for you to do this. I know this is what you have for me, but I'm just waiting. You know what you are excited about. You know the promise that you're excited about. Think about how you view that promise when you get it. And then I want you to times that by 10, because that's what God is going to bring to you because of your obedience. It's going to be more than you could ever imagine or think. Your mind can't even fathom what he has for you when it comes to that promise, that particular thing. So continue. When God says do something, just like what Simon says, or with Siri, when Siri says turn left, you turn left. When in the situation with Simon, when Simon says raise your right hand, raise your right hand. When God says do this, do it. Because your obedience is attached to when you will see your promise. All right, B2L fam, I love you all. And I just wanted to get on here and share this with you. And I will be back on sometime this week with another word to share with you from the Lord, because he's given me several words, but I'm being obedient and releasing them when he's instructing me to. So I wanted to share this with you, and I pray that this helps someone to really see that God has so much in store for you, but we have to be obedient. And remember, number one, number one, number one, when you wake up in the morning, what are you going to do? You're going to thank God for waking you up in the morning, and then you're going to die to yourself, meaning saying, God, not my will, but your will be done. God, give me the strength as I go through this day to not lean on my understanding, but to lean on your understanding. God, give me the strength to die to my flesh. And it's not my desires, but God, help me to take on your desires. You give me the desires of your heart, not of my heart, but give me your desires, God, so that I can walk out the plan you have for my life. Family, I love you all. And until next chat, be blessed.